Before we talk about the Killing Season and those movies as well, one thing that there was a moment in that where we saw a clip from Get Shorty, which is a terrific film, and you're on screen there with James Gandolfini, who of course so tragically died last week, far too young. What can you tell us about working with him as an actor, and your association with him as a friend?
Well, you know, he was one of those people that you'd fall in love with the moment you met him. You know, he just was that kind of, he was always people first and then show business. And he remained that way throughout his whole career. And he was there first when my son passed away, and he wouldn't leave my small town that we live in, my family lives in, unless he knew I was okay. So he's that kind of human being, and I can't say enough about James Gandolfini. And we did 5 movies together, and I loved working with him. We were a natural act together.
Yeah, well, on screen there was obviously there was a chemistry. You can see that in all those performances together. Okay, let's talk about The Killing Season, because everyone here has just watched it. A different kind of movie for you, different from the kind of films we've seen you make recently. First of all, what attracted you to it? And well, let's start with that. What attracted you to it? Why did you want to play that?
Well, it was one of these scripts that was in the States they have this thing called the Blacklist, where it's all the best unproduced scripts that Hollywood has to offer, and they're not yet financed. And I put together this and then got it financed, and then asked Robert De Niro if he would join me in doing it. And it was because of the quality of the script and the quality of the statement. You know, we haven't seen movies like this since Born on the 4th of July, or maybe Coming Home, where it's really a statement about, an essay on war, if you will, and what war does to men's minds. And I felt it was important to reinvestigate that, especially what's going on in the Middle East too, where men come home and they're just never the same, you know. And what if we didn't end it with violence, but we ended it with just a mirror image of 2 people reflecting in each other's souls what they feel terrible about and how they can't resolve it in their future, and maybe there's a glimmer of hope at the end for them to have recovery of some sort. So it was all that helped me. And I love doing, you can see I love doing accents, and I love being other people.
What accent was that you were doing there? I was trying to... I'm kidding, you know.
It was, you know, it was, I have to have a challenge, you know, otherwise I get bored too easily. So I need something to do. And well, I wish I could have played Margaret Thatcher. I could have done it as well. You know, a bit of thoughts.
Once again, what accent was that you were just doing there? Is this something, making a movie like that, obviously it's fairly complex, it's a sophisticated message, and that's unusual in Hollywood perhaps these days.
Well, especially nowadays, because no one will finance these kind of movies, you know. I established my career on people movies, not on gimmicks, you know. So it's very difficult to get these kinds of movies done, and we did it, but it's a rarity. You know,
and is that a sort of subject matter? Was that a kind of an issue that you were looking for a movie to make a statement about, or was it the screenplay itself that then woke up something in you?
Well, no, it's both, because the screenplay offered a statement that I wanted to make. I'm not very interested in films that are gratuitously violent. You know, I think they have to have some point, and this one had a point. And any time it was dark, it meant something, you know. And it was a very ugly war, you know, that we all know about, and it was very difficult to understand that war. I flew over I visited Bosnia, Croatia, and Serbia to try to understand it, because it was very complicated. And I interviewed lots of ex-soldiers, and finally when I left, I believed that I understood what was going on, and the sub-scene, that was the bigger countries that were encouraging this war, which was even more revealing to me. So, you know, I like the research part of it, you know, and that was fun, and worked very hard on developing this character, because there had to be a coldness and a distance in his behavior, and I wanted to change his physical presence, you know, his walk, the deadness in his eyes, you know, and I felt like we achieved that, you know, to make it accurate, to make it different, because we're both American actors, and I wanted to define my guy because of what you're used to seeing on screen. You're used to seeing Robert De Niro, John Travolta in a certain way, and I wanted to define them with strong strokes.
What's your perception then of how we regard John Travolta on screen? What do you think we think of when we think of you in a movie?
Well, the good news for me has always been is that the audience has gone wherever I ask them to go with me. As long as I do a convincing enough job, I find that the audience I am allowed to tell them a story that is a journey, take them on a journey, and without too much protest, which is great, you know.
It was a thrill to see you on screen with De Niro. That was, and I didn't know whether that would ever happen. Do you have a wish list? Was he someone? I presume he was probably near the top of the list of people you asked to be in that with you. Do you have a list of people you've been looking to work with, and are there other ones that you haven't achieved yet?
I sought after for 30 some odd years,
yeah.
And Meryl Streep is another that I've sought after, and those are probably my two favorite actors to want to share the screen with. Marlon Brando was a dear friend of mine, and I had actually booked him in a civil action before Robert Duvall took the role because, you know, he was concerned about them really trusting him because he had a reputation of being, you know, altering scripts or, you know, behaving in a certain way, and it really wasn't true. He only altered scripts if they weren't good.
If you find yourself working on a film where the script isn't necessarily good, are you tempted to alter it, or do you?
Well, that's what improvisation is for, you know. I am even as perfect as Pulp Fiction was a screenplay and even got an Academy Award. I still improvised here and there.
Okay, give us a clue. Which scenes we improvised? Which moments we improvised?
Well, a little bit of the one that you just saw when I said I shot Marvin in the face. That was a bit. There's little tags in about 4 or 5 of the scenes that I felt that it was such a dark piece that I had to cut it with humor, and I came from comedy, so I just decided that if I could make this guy funny in any way, and, you know, even when he says I shot him in the face and you must have hit a bump or something, I mean that is like a kid trying to
yeah.
to, you know, not be blamed for something that he did, you know. Humor is always a way of cutting darkness in movies.
You say you come from comedy, and I think certainly in the UK we weren't necessarily aware of that. You're talking, I guess, about your TV work earlier on.
Yeah, Welcome Back, Kotter, and I did musical comedy in New York on Broadway. And I did theater from the time I was 12 until 26 years old.
Were you a good stage actor? Do you miss being on the stage?
I'm sacrilegious to say this, but I got burned out. You know, I was 12 years old, and I went till I was...
Hey, we've all been burned out at 12, haven't we, ladies and gentlemen?
Well, I started doing 8 shows a week for, you know, different years and summers at a time, and I think by the time I was in my 20s, I just was tired.
Yeah.
And so you could beckon me back into the theater, but it better be, you know, Mike Nichols writing an original play that's got a great character.
Meryl Streep on stage.
Yeah, then I'm going to town. But you know, when the only bad part about doing so much theater in a row is that you do get 8 shows a week for a year, 2 years, 3 years, gets a lot.
Yeah.
You know.
Welcome Back, Kotter was a huge TV phenomenon in the States, wasn't it? It wasn't really, I don't think, I mean, I think I can speak for, I don't remember it on TV here. It might have shown, but I don't think it was the hit it was over there. And there was a chance, I guess, that you would be stuck in that. You would have been stuck in TV doing those kind of roles. And then, was The Boy in the Plastic Bubble, was that the first big break for you, or was it?
Well, Boy in the Plastic Bubble was the biggest TV movie in history at the time, along with Brian's song at that time. But it was really Brian De Palma and the director you want to talk about from Thin Red Line.
Terrence Malick, yeah.
That kind of discovered me. I was supposed to be in A Days of Heaven, and the Kotter series wouldn't let me out to do it. And then Brian De Palma picked me up for Carrie, and I withheld the fact that I was on a TV series because I felt that maybe they wouldn't want a TV actor doing a movie. And he said, why? He said, you're great on that. He said, I don't have any snobbery about that. He said, do this movie with us. So, and there was a movie that was mostly improvised too. But that's where I really got my movie start, was Terrence Malick and Brian De Palma.
And then when you made, am I right in thinking that when you made, I think both Saturday Night Fever and Grease, you were still under contract to Welcome Back, Kotter?
Yes.
So you were making these movies that were, the biggest movies on the planet, and then going back to do the TV show.
Yes.
Wow, was that good? Was that fun?
Well, what happened was there was a very famous actress by the name of Farrah.
Mia Farrow?
No. Farrah Fawcett. And she had left a series called Charlie's Angels, and she got beat up for it. So my manager and I decided that that wasn't the popular way to go, even though I'd have had every reason to leave because I had empirical truth that I was doing well in movies, and I could. But he said it just wouldn't be good for publicly to do that. So we decided not to leave the series, and it sorted out very well.
And I guess looking back, that was a comparatively short period of your life that you stayed there, and
Yeah.
it was a nice way to end that experience.
Exactly. It was 4 years. Yeah.
If they were to do a Welcome Back Kotter movie, they love going back and digging these films out. Would you appear in the Welcome Back Kotter big screen version now?
What would I do?
You'd be an elderly Kotter. Well, you weren't Kotter. Who were you in it? Kotter was the teacher,
I was
wasn't
Vinnie
it?
Barbarino. I was the class Italian dummy, I guess, you know.
I'm sure you could still play that if you had to.
Well, it would be kind of sad to see.
Well, maybe it could be a drama now. Not,
Yes.
not so Welcome
He
Back
never
Kotter.
graduated high school.
Let's talk about Saturday Night Fever then, because what a remarkable phenomena that film is. Phenomenon, sorry. Just extraordinary, and I think in some ways it was kind of a little bit. It wasn't taken as seriously initially in the UK as it should have been, because I think it came on the wave over here, at least, of the disco success of the album and so on and so forth, and we thought maybe. But of course, it's a very gritty, it's very powerful, it's a very kind of true story, and the dancing in it is, even by today's standards, extraordinary.
Thank you.
It's remarkable performance and remarkable dancing skills as well. Were you already, you learnt that disco presumably for the film? You weren't dancing on that
Well,
previously?
it goes back to De Niro, actually, because he was doing movies like New York, and Raging Bull, where the rumor was you were really becoming the thing that you had to act. And I decided that I had to really become this excellent, best in town disco dancer. So I studied for 9 months, all day, every day, and really owned that part. And it was Norman Wexler wrote it, and it was a very well-written screenplay, and it got me my first Oscar nomination. So it was a wonderful thing. I thought it would be a little art film that would just disappear, and I'd get back to Terrence Malick and do something more significant, you know. So that's really how I always felt. So it was a big surprise to me what a big hit it was.
And you would go out, is it true while you were learning, you would go out and you would dance in the clubs in Brooklyn, in Manhattan?
Yeah. It was the theme of the day, and still is now. You know, you can't just show up unprepared for a role. You have to become that role.
When you go out now, people must be hoping you're going to bust some of those moves out. Do you feel that pressure?
Yeah, Princess Diana certainly did. All right, and I did with her. And when Sean Connery wanted me to, I was really.
Wow, that's a very mixed dance card you've got
was,
going there.
yes. He said to me, it was a party for Frank Sinatra. And this
Hold it, stop dropping names, will you? None of us can keep up. So you're at a party for Frank Sinatra with Sean Connery.
And Sean Connery was there, and it was a few years after I had danced with Princess Diana, and I was leaving the party with my wife, and he said, "John, where are you going?" And I said, I got to go home. I got to get up at 6 tomorrow. He said, "Not before you dance with me, you're not." and I said, "Really?" He said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay." So we danced, and then of course everyone lined up to dance, and I really had to go.
Wow! But what an anecdote! It's like, did you wake up in the next morning and think, did any of that happen?
Yeah, kind of. You know?
Okay, but you know, the truth of the matter is, at the heart of that film, there's a performance, and a strong performance, and a very real and true performance of a young man at a certain stage in his life in a kind of in a city which was, you know, in a difficult time of it, and that must have been, I guess, that was what attracted you initially. It must have been the chance of playing that. So when you get offered a part like Grease, which is a very different kind of movie. How was the decision arrived at to do that then? Presumably you were.
Well, Grace had done on Broadway, and I'd done for a year in the National Road Company, so I was very familiar with that and knew the parts. I knew my role. I knew other roles. It was a breeze to slip right into that.
Were you the first Danny on Broadway, or did you?
No, I wasn't. I was in the first National Company, and then I went back to Broadway, and I was too young to play Danny, believe it or not. I played Duty. And but in the back of my mind, I thought, when they make the movie of Grease, I'm going to play Danny.
And so you weren't concerned that a movie which was essentially going to be, if it was a success, a very broad-based success. I mean, not a kind of complex movie, not a sophisticated film in terms of character and stuff, but a fun.
Well, I really loved the play, and I loved everything about Grease, and I didn't care if it was a critically acclaimed anything, because I knew the joy that it gave me as a kid watching it, and I couldn't wait to give that joy on screen to others.
Yeah.
So the critical had nothing to do with anything in my mind at that time because of the joy.
So you didn't have an image of yourself, or you didn't have an idea of what career you wanted in so far as like doing a certain kind of movie?
Well, my idea was I could do anything that I needed to do, you know, and that is why I think audiences allowed me to do them, because I didn't limit my possibilities. So whatever I was asked to do, I felt I could do.
It's interesting because when we think about actors like De Niro, you can't imagine De Niro accepting a role at that time of his career in something like Grease. And in a weird kind of way, his career was limited by his refusal to do that kind, or his desire not to do that kind of thing.
Well, my career was made on chances, risk-taking completely. And the truth is, if I don't take risks, I don't do well. And so I have the perversity, or the reverse of your average actor situation. And I'm being sincere when I say that. I have to do something very different, otherwise I don't do as well. And that's fine with me, because that's what I wanted. You know, I came from a theater family. You know, we were challenged continually in our house to be the best we could be. You know.
Is it true you turned down the role in American Gigolo?
Yes.
Okay. So why did you turn down that role? And when it came out and made Richard Gere a star, by the way, you owe us all an apology for that. When that, it's just a joke. I love Richard Gere. But when you turned that down and then you saw this film, and it's I think quite a magnificent film, and it's a great part as well, it seems to me. Why did you not want to play that?
Well, I had just done a film called Moment by Moment, which had not succeeded, where I had played an older, younger scenario, and it was basically a similar thing. But the truth was that Paul Schrader and I did not get along, and even though I was a little nervous about the same scenario, I was more nervous about my not getting along with him. We didn't see eye to eye, and I asked Michael Eisner to get me out of the movie, to be honest.
That makes
but I
perfect
replaced
sense.
it with Urban Cowboy, and I love Urban Cowboy. It's
Urban Cowboy is a great film.
a great film, and I would have much rather done that regardless, and it was twice the success.
Yeah.
So I was happy with what happened.
Let me ask you about, I would love to talk about the different directors you work with. You've already named some of my favourites there. And Paul Schrader's one of my favourite directors, but I do understand he is apparently quite can be challenging company. But when you make a movie like Staying Alive, and here we have directed by one of my all-time favourite movie stars, Sylvester Stallone, and you're returning to a role that you've already really kind of done, I would have thought, and B, it's a very different take on it with a different sort of director. Once again, what was why make that decision? What were you hoping to achieve with that, and what did you feel of the finished result?
The truth was that I never wanted to make the sequel to Saturday Night Fever. It was part of the getting out of American Gigolo and doing Urban Cowboy, but I had to do another movie.
So it was a trade-off.
Trade-off of two movies. I wanted to do Urban Cowboy. I did not want to do Staying Alive, so I just thought that he had done Rocky III, and he had made a big success of all three, and he was willing to do it. And I thought, you know, if I have to do it, might as well guarantee the success of it and let him do it. And he allowed me to do whatever style of dance I wanted. I wanted to do more jazz, ballet style, and he let me do that. And it was...
We weren't ready for that.
No.
But it was a hit, though, still, wasn't it? I
Yes,
mean, it was a
it was
hit. And you had Stallone as your personal trainer, I guess, because you've never looked quite as, you know, absurdly fit as you do in that film.
Yes, I created another kind of trend. It was with the body, I guess. But yeah, he oversaw my training, and but it was good for my health.
Your careers, I mean, you know, he came to fame and success slightly later than you, Stallone, but has had a similar kind of career of length and has played a lot of different roles. I'm surprised he hasn't asked you to be in The Expendables yet. Has he made the call?
He talked about the next one, but you know, honestly, they're not my kind of film. You know, they're not I mean, I love Cy, and I know he loves me, but they're not exactly what I would be attracted to do in a movie. It's just, you know, you looked at what I...
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
That was a very elegant way of sidestepping that particular movie. But I get what you're saying. Okay, let me ask you about some of, before we get to Pulp Fiction, there's a period, say, after Perfect, or leading up to, say, Pulp Fiction, where there were movies which were viewed, I think, somewhat differently in your career. And I look back on somewhat differently now, not seen as being as successful, not seen as showcasing your talent quite as much. How was that period for you? Did you feel like you were off the boil somewhat, or do you feel that the audience were out of sync with what you were trying to achieve?
It was an odd time because, you know, I didn't have a view of anything other than what I was busy living life and dancing with Princess Diana. And I mean, I didn't view myself as a fallen star. Do you know what I mean? And then Look Who's Talking came along, and it was an enormous success. And what I did know is that I wasn't being offered the Oscar caliber roles anymore. So there was a difference in the quality of parts or movies I was getting, but there wasn't a difference really in the stardom, let's say. So your ego won't let you register all that too much, and it's better not to. You just kind of say, well, one day something will come up, and one day something did. Pulp Fiction came right in my lap, and I was resistant to even do it. I said, how do I do this? How do I play this heroin addict that has to blow someone's head off and wear it on his face and, you know, shoot up, you know, and like kill people? I mean, how do I play this and make it watchable? It could be just like grotesque, you know. And so I resisted it, and Quentin kept on fighting for me to do it. And but finally I thought, okay, maybe if I find some humor in how to do this, and I, you know, so I hung out with heroin addicts to see how they get high, what the arc of their high is, what does it feel like at first, what does it feel like in the middle and the bound, and I gather enough data to portray a guy that I felt would be entertaining and convincing, and the writing was excellent. So that's really, it was my trajectory in that, through that.
You know, I assumed you did some, but I didn't know you did quite the amount of research that you obviously do.
Oh, that's most of it. If I do enough research and enough homework, then filming is a breeze. You know, it's when you don't go prepared that filming is difficult. And it's the same with stage, drilling, rehearsal, getting prepared. I mean, that's all, and it's all part of the fun of it too. You know, I enjoy it. It's not, you know, taxing on me, but it is work. Do
you have a ritual, or is there a kind of routine? Do you some actors start with the walk, or the shoes, or the voice, or what do you?
Well, all that's important to me. If you notice that, I don't like there to be too many similarities in the way I walk or talk or behave.
Well, I can tell from the way you walk, you're a woman's man.
No time to talk.
Apologise for that last. But you start with the physicality of the role then?
Not necessarily, but it has to be in there at some point. Meaning, I include the physicality because it's a visual medium, yeah. And you have to, in order to make a person feel convinced that you are that person, you know. So with Pulp Fiction, in interviewing these people that had this particular habit and whatever I could discover about the profession of being hitman, but I just decided that he would be more arch-shouldered, and he would possibly, you know, slumber along, you know, because he's not, you know,
not bouncing with life.
Yeah, exactly. We're Silent Fever, you know, the guy's got life in him, and he's got, you know, a kind of spirit that is he explodes, you know. So there's every physical attribute of a character has a different life in it, you know. So that being said, that's part of the research and the fun is how can I do this, and also to very quickly get you comfortable with it. Even in Pelham 1, 2, 3, you know, Tony Scott and I designed this look that was very kind of prison-esque, yeah. You know, with a gun tattoo and the rough face, and almost a guy that wanted to be a black guy, but he was a white guy. You know, he that kind of approach to him street, and who knows what happened to him in prison, but he came out. He went in white collar, and he came out this other guy. You know,
came out Jay-Z.
Jay-Z, exactly.
Do you ever not see eye to eye with the director? Though? If you go in with a walk, with a look, with a suggestion, are there times when you've wanted to play someone a certain way and you've hit resistance, or is that not ever the issue for you because they trust you?
Well, you can, but I've noticed that the great directors allow you to, they pay you to do what you do, and then you allow them to do what they do. But I found that great directors leave you alone for the most part. They're anxious to see your interpretation. I'll give you an example, and about 5 top directors said that. But the first one who ever said to me, I was in Blowout, and I said, I don't know whether to play it this way, or that way. He said, that's why I paid you. He said, if I were an actor, I'd figure it. He said, but you decide what the right choice is for that. I said, okay. So he gave me my hat early on, to make those choices. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't get guidance, clever guidance, but when Mike Nichols hired me for Primary Colors, he knew I knew the character of Clinton, and he let me go, and it was only cadences, which I noticed with Quentin Tarantino. He wanted me to hit operative words in the dialogue, and that I don't mind at all. I like designing the cadences of speech. So when they wanted me to hit something instead of something else, that was easy direction. But a lot of the great ones let you go because they feel, according to survey, that 90% of the job is done in casting. So once they cast you, then they can kind of design the structure of the movie, but they know that you're going to show up with a performance.
That box is ticked. How is it working with directors who maybe English isn't their first language? You work with John Woo, and I love his Hong Kong movies.
I love John Woo.
That must be trickier because if he can't really. I wouldn't have thought he would have an ear for language. And
well, that's a good point because often it was, you come over here and you move and then you take a Coke or something. And
I can say that's a very good impersonation of John Woo because I've met him several times.
You drink it and then you look, So, but he was wonderful because I even said to him, John, I have to be Nick Cage, and talk like this and, behave like Nick. I said, you have me in close-up. I said, when I say to the wife I'm pretending to be her husband, I'm being Nick, and I say, I hate to see you go, but I love to watch you leave. And I do this with my hands, which is very Nick. And he had it here. I said, I would love, it would be really funny if you could just catch that, frame it. And he said, but it would take about an hour to undo it. He said, we have it. He said, you really think it's worth it? I said, I really think it's worth it. I said, because it really, again, allows the audience to believe that I've become Nick, any little detail that we can do. So he acquiesced to that, and I got, so even with a language barrier, it was we got on very well.
Nick Cage is someone who's I very much like as a person, but I enjoy his work tremendously, especially when he bugs out beyond any kind of reasonable level of bugging out. So playing him and him playing you, that must have been a different sort of challenge altogether, I would have thought, wouldn't it? Because you're delivering performance and you're impersonating, but not physically impersonating.
But he's such a spirited, he was up for a game to play, He saw my first dailies and he said, oh, I see, we're going to do this kind of movie where we really... go for it. I said, yeah, let's do it. We got Woo, we got a great idea. Let's do it. And he said, okay. So we would watch each other's dailies and we'd decide together how to behave. It was much harder for him. I have to, give him this because I'm difficult to figure out as who I am. When I'm on screen, he said he had to watch 30 movies to find who was I,
He delivers a more stylized performance, lots of bugging out stuff and all that.
And then I may, just be the character, and he'd have to grab bits. He said, I grab bits from Phenomenon, I grab bits from Look Who's Talking. He said, but I really couldn't find you. He said, so you have to help me, So, and he's much more stylized as a person in general.
But that must be a nice thing to hear as an actor, that someone couldn't find you in the roles too easily. Yes. I would have thought. Do you guard yourself deliberately? Is that something that you don't like people knowing who you are unless they're very close? Do you take a long while to let people into the real Travolta, or do you feel pretty much you're sharing yourself on screen with us anyway?
I don't have any kind of major defenses as a person, really. I mean, what you're seeing now is, you know, pretty much what you get. No, you know. I
Let
mean,
me ask you then about some of the other directors you've worked with who I adore. And there's one I'd forgotten, actually. I saw the clip there of Michael and Nora Ephron, who once again, sadly, is
Oh,
no
yes.
longer with us. I've always loved her writing, and I love her directing as well. Once again, quite a way out role and quite a chance you took playing a fallen angel.
yes, yes. And again, she allowed me to have my own ball-grabbing, sugar-eating, you know, smoking interpretation that was mine, you know, and it was brave for her to let me do some of the choices that I did in that. And Nora was very, very talented, you know, very talented lady.
Who are the directors you work with you've most enjoyed? I get the feeling you have a real affinity with De Palma.
Yes.
Someone you've enjoyed, and obviously he was there early in your career.
Quentin, you know, our rapport was amazing, you know, and De Palma, who felt like I you know, discovered me, and John Woo and Mike Nichols. Mike Nichols, I loved working with him because he, you know, he's a bit of a snob in a good way, and he treated you like you were the royal family of acting, and even if you're not, you believed it. When he said, you know, you know, he even had this kind of aloof thing, but it made you feel that you were the best, and you wanted to deliver for him the best, and that was his trick, you know. Gosh, there's so many directors I enjoyed working with.
Let me ask you about Terrence Malick, because you said you nearly worked with him early on. He's a fascinating director, and also, obviously, from what I understand, Thin Red Line, he shot a lot of material, a lot of storylines, some which barely appear.
Yeah.
In the film. I mean, did you expect to be in it more? Was that the part you shot as you shot
No,
it?
this was to make up for not doing Days of Heaven, literally, because he left the business for 17 years after I couldn't do the part, and I said to him, you couldn't be serious, right? And he said no. He said, and I said, explain that to me, because that's so romantic that I can hardly stand it. Like what's the thinking behind not doing a movie for 17 years because I couldn't be in it? I mean, that's like what you do with major romances or something, you know. And he said it was not only that I couldn't do it, but that the people would manipulate the business in such a way that they would block you from doing what you want. And they blocked him from what he did, and it was very clear that they could have worked it out, and they didn't. He just got damaged from the blocking or something, you know. And I was always very touched and moved by it. But anyway, Thin Red Line was to make up for that, and basically that was mostly improvised role too, you know, because he wanted me to play this admiral, and he would just give me the rough situation, and he'd say lines like this and do that, and I, you know, maybe and he'd even throw out things while we were shooting, and it was very interesting, and I loved working with him as well. But again, the people that have used me, that it has turned out great, really, you know, loved me. And Marlon Brando said to me, and this is, I had already discovered this, but he said, unless a director's in love with you, it's not going to work. He said, they have to be just crazy about you. You're the only person that can do that role. No one else can, and if they don't get you, they might as well not do the movie. That's how passionate they have to be about you. And because an actor feeds off that. Otherwise, you get a very ordinary performance, a very, you know, normal, you know, professional job, but you don't get that extra thing. And all those directors, even Robert Altman, I did a Pinter play on TV for him years ago, but I knew he loved me, and the way he directed me was so, you know, he gave me one thing that, you know, we're hitmen in this Pinter play, and it was with Tom Conti, and he said to me, what if your guy was illiterate? Like, what if he just couldn't read, and every time he was picking up a newspaper, he was making up the headline. So, that's it. I love that. And I used it all the way through. So it looked more, it was actually more evil and menacing because
Yeah.
he was tormenting his partner, because he knew his partner was going to get hit, you know.
Who are the directors who you haven't had the chance to work with, who haven't had the chance to fall in love with you enough yet to cast you?
Well, let's see. Scorsese.
Scorsese must be admired. He must have liked Saturday Night Fever, I would have thought.
Oh, no, he's a very big fan, but again, you know, these are people that do one movie every 5 years. So your odds of, it's not high, they're not high odds.
What about any of the younger guys coming up now, for example, like Nicholas Winding Refn or even Lars von Trier, some of the kind of slightly loonier European directors? Would you want to work with them?
Sure, I've done a lot of first-time directors and had good experiences. So age or, it's their ability that intrigues me.
It's very difficult to imagine you not being a star in the films you're in. I mean, I can't imagine. I remember once reading a quote from Jack Nicholson where he said that unless you're the star, there's no point being in the business. And I think he was probably slightly tongue-in-cheek. But would you have been as happy making movies if you'd have been cast as a character actor, if you'd have had smaller roles and the big roles hadn't?
Well, character actor is what I like best, so I probably would have been happy with that. But I'm an odd guy in life, meaning that nothing becomes that significant to me that, I'm like James in a way where people are more important to me than film and all this other stuff. So I don't know. There's a lot of things. I mean, I'm a pilot. I fly 11 different types of jets, and if life had led me there, I might have found happiness too.
Do you like films about planes as well? You remember the kind of airplane movies in the 70s?
Oh yeah, they were funny.
Well, so where does your love of flying come from? Presumably not from those movies, but presumably it was...
Well, actually, the love of flying was very specific. It was my sisters and my mother were in show business, and they were flying around a lot when I was a kid, and I fell in love with flying from watching them travel, and then we were under the airport. LaGuardia Airport in New York was actually, the pattern was over our house. And I just fell in love with the design of aircraft. I could have told you everything about the British history of aviation and the Canadian history and the, French history. I mean, I was obsessed with it. So that was my own self-created interest.
You fly. I remember once interviewing you at a junket. You came out. I think was it Rumble? What was the film with Halle Berry in? Rumblefish, was it?
No, it was called Swordfish.
Swordfish. I'm sorry, Rumblefish, of course, was Capone. And you flew everyone over. They came over for the junket, I believe, in a plane that you flew. And then everyone had to go to the junket down by City Airport because you were parked there. And then the next day you flew everyone back, which must have been, I would have thought, just about as much fun as you can have.
Yes, I mean, I've flown several casts of movies around, and that is fun. I like it's a whole other, look, I approach acting the same way I approach life. If there's a new, so now I like tennis. I didn't play tennis. I played tennis when I was younger. I played only in the last 4 or 5 years. So now I'm very interested in that. So I grab onto things that I'm interested in, and I keep a hold of them until I satisfy the urge of the interest.
And the urge being what? To become good at something?
Yes, yes. And,
so how good at tennis are you right now, then?
Oh, do you want to challenge me, mate?
Well, Nadal's been knocked out. There might be a wild card going if you want to get in there. Could you do me a favour? Would you make for all of us here one of your pilot announcements? Imagine we're in the back of one of your extraordinarily large planes, okay? We're taking off. You've hit some turbulence, John, okay? So we're a bit uncertain. How do you calm us down?
Well, let's see. I would say, well, first of all, I'd warn you before that. I'd say, ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. And at about 10 minutes' time, we're going to experience a bit of turbulence. Nothing to be worried about. We'll get through this, and it will, I just ask you to keep your seat belts fastened, and we'll see you on the other side of it.
Would you be tempted to freak them out with a streak of... Hey, it just occurred to me. Were you jealous when you saw Denzel Washington get to play the pilot? Because that was a part you should have had, surely.
Well, the funny thing is, it was written for me.
Wow.
Yes, and that was a sore point for me because I went to the studio. I met with Paramount. I met with the writer. It was not written well enough yet. The plain stuff, not the part. I loved that he was alcoholic. I loved the recovery. I loved his journey a lot. But the plain stuff was silly, from my perspective at the time.
As it is in the finished movie, because I don't want to spoil it for anyone.
Yeah.
He flies that mother down upside down.
Yeah, it's a bit much.
Could you do that?
Well, it's a long story, but it was something that I was arguing over, you know, and I just wanted those bits to get.
They must have known when they said it to you that of all the actors they could send it to, the person who might have a problem with the more extreme flying activity in it
Well, the
would
funny
be you.
thing was, I asked him. I said, "Did you not ask a professional, you know, someone who knew something?" And he said, "I didn't want any interference. I just wanted to get the screenplay done." I said, "I know, but the stuff that you're writing, you know." And so what happened was that it never came back to me after the director.
Who directed Flight? I can't remember.
Bob Zemeckis
of course, yeah.
had a Jones for Denzel Washington to do it, and that's who he wanted to do it with. And the writer was a first-time director, and I was in if he got to direct.
Right.
But Zemeckis wanted Denzel, so it was lifted from the writer's hands and put into into Zemeckis' hand, and then it went off. But I think I probably would have had still a problem with the flight stuff.
Yeah.
You know, but I did love the journey of the character.
That's a great role to have.
Yes,
and seeing, as someone who doesn't know about flying, I enjoyed the flight stuff. I was thrilled to see a plane flown upside down. I've been looking for that kind of thing for a while.
No, it would have been interesting to play, and I think that the writer knew that it was made for me. I mean, you know, I live that life, except I'm not the drinker that pilot was, but I like a martini once in a while.
Have you
Before
ever
the
had
flight.
have you had a bad moment on a plane? Have you had moments where you
Yeah,
thought
I've
maybe
had-
your planes would go down?
In 1992, I was flying a Gulfstream over Washington, D.C., and I lost all my electricity. And I had to fly through IFR weather, which is instrument flight rules, and I had to fly through severe weather. And most people may not have made that, you know, but my training kicked in, and I found a hole in the sky and landed safely. And but it's a pretty interesting scenario when you have a black cockpit and you can't, you know, you have a couple of spare instruments that you're flying on that are going to go any minute. You know.
Is that when you enjoy the martini as well as them?
After.
When you get down.
After, yeah.
But you're not a thrill seeker as a person. You're not someone who likes putting themselves in higher.
Only in roles. I'm thrilled. If you give me a role that challenges me, which Killing Season was, then I get a thrill out of that. Taking a risk, I get it. So when I did Hairspray, I fought to make that character a woman, because you know the joke, which I thought was more like a vaudeville joke, was, you know, a man as a woman, was not as interesting to me as really trying to convince the audience that this was a woman, okay, and that was important to me. And I got resistance on it because I think some people wanted to make it political, and I said, look, you want me to do it, I do it as a woman, but she's got to be all that in a bag of chips. She's got to be voluptuous and in her day, you know, and she's got to have the Baltimore accent, because if you can let me have that Baltimore accent where the placement in the voice is higher and very specific, you know, and it's more feminine as opposed to a New York accent, I said I can make people believe I'm this woman, and it turned out to be, you know, correct, you know.
And I'm sure I speak for many